The Rundown with Carrie Saldo podcast is funded by Armbrook Village Senior Living in Westfield, offering assisted living and compass memory support with evidence-based treatment for those with memory loss. More at armbrookvillage.com.
This is The Rundown, your weekly news and review from Western Mass. I'm Carrie Saldo. Good morning. Election night parties have come and gone, but our panelists are here to shimmy and shake just the same. Post-party panelists are Dusty Christensen, investigations editor at The Shoestring, editor of Western Mass Politics and Insight Matt Safransky, and Paul Tudhill, reporter emeritus. If you have something to say, email the rundown at nepm.org. That's the rundown at nepm.org. Coming up, Tuesday's elections included a number of city council races across Western Mass. We'll take a closer look at what happened in Springfield and Holyoke. But first, let's discuss the position that's tasked with working with those councilors, or not, mayors. In 5 mayoral seats with contested races across the 413, we saw incumbents win the day. One interim mayor also won the day. 2 of the most dynamic races were Northampton and East Hampton. Northampton voters returned their incumbent, Gina Louise Shera, but it was a very close election, a very close race there. And then the open seat for East Hampton, the voters tapped interim mayor Salem Derby, who will be their new mayor. But specifically in Northampton, I know that you reported on this, Dusty. Jillian Duclos, the challenger, lost by just 76 votes to the incumbent out of the 9,400 or so ballots that were cast. What do you make of this?
Yeah, I think Northampton was really interesting for one big reason, and that is that over the last 2 years or so, there has been this grassroots movement, support our schools or save our schools. They've previously, I think, were called, who really felt like Chiara and other city councilors who were allied with her had underfunded the city's schools. There had been some layoffs in 2 budgets prior, and they really started building political momentum around this idea of funding city services more, spending less on capital projects and more on funding education. And they fielded a slate of candidates across all the city council races, school committee races, and for mayor as well, Jillian Duclos. And though they fell short of reaching a majority on the council, they came within, as you say, I think it was 76 votes of the mayor's race. There is a lot of incumbents that won here in Western Mass. The incumbency power is really big, and so to have an incumbent almost be defeated like that, I think is pretty surprising.
That was reporting you did for The Shoestring. Paul Tudhill, go ahead.
Yeah, a very surprising final result in Northampton, I would say. I don't think anybody could have foreseen this when you consider that the incumbent, Gina Louise Chiara, coming out of the preliminary, had bested her closest challenger, Jillian Duclos, by a 2-to-1 margin. And for Duclos to close that to fewer than 100 votes in 6 or 7 weeks is just a remarkable feat of campaigning. So, kudos to her and her supporters. The political action committee that was that Dusty mentioned, that it was pushing for more funding for the schools. The teachers union, yep. The teachers union was also behind her. And I think what this means for Chiara going forward in her administration when she begins her second term is that she's going to have to address some of these issues now from something other than a defensive posture, which is where she was during the campaign. And that includes the school funding, the Main Street reconstruction project, and this issue with the vacant church that the city spent a couple $1 million on without having any funds in place to actually do anything with it after they bought it.
And that's just sitting there waiting to be redeveloped downtown as they sort of figure out what's next. Matt, in Dusty's reporting, when he looked at these candidates in the region running on this idea of increasing school funding, but not all the candidates who ran on that platform we saw success, as we're talking about here, right? With so much financial uncertainty at the federal level, with the government shutdown, what's happened with the Trump administration, do you think that those federal issues had an impact here where people were like, I don't know if we have more money for schools at this point?
I don't know if it was quite that direct. I mean, I think that a lot of people, most important concern they have is like, are their schools being funded to the degree that they believe that they are? If you have layoffs at the school department, people are going to notice that, even if they don't necessarily affect their child at all. I mean, this has been, we've seen just recently, Longmeadow approved money for a new middle school, and then now the town reliably approves more money for the schools because there's kind of an existential need for it. There's no property values if there aren't good schools in Longmeadow. So I mean, sometimes people will make that connection. I think what you might see to a certain extent is how much people are actually experiencing those cuts. If they especially with the decline of a lot of local news, a lot of people might not be aware of what's being cut or how it's affecting their child, if it's affecting them at all. If they are affecting them, it's going to have an issue. And I've heard that in Northampton that some of these cuts were close enough to a lot of parents that even if their child wasn't like directly affected, they heard about it. They heard that somebody that worked with a friend wasn't getting whatever they had before. And so that can have a ripple effect, and that's where it will probably have the most impact at the ballot box.
All right, let's move on to East Hampton. Sam Furland, the Daily Hampshire Gazette, quoting here, Salem Derby will be the city's fourth mayor after voters on Tuesday picked the longtime city councilor over Lindsay Sekula and Jason J.T. Terrell in a race that featured the largest voter turnout since East Hampton became a city in 1996. Derby campaigned on the message of proven experience as a longtime city council member for 22 years. Interestingly, Derby spent the least amount of money of any of the campaigners, about $3,000. Terrell spent almost $19,000, and Sekula $4,400. Surprise there that the little money comes out on top?
I think though that Derby, when he took office in July as the interim mayor, he didn't take over as just a placeholder. He took over with the intention of being mayor, and he built a relationship.
Initially he said he wasn't going to run, and then a couple weeks later said he was going to.
He quickly changed his mind.
Power.
And whatever. He worked at the job, and voters obviously rewarded him for the short amount of time that he was in office and decided to give him a full term. And
also it's worth noting that because East Hampton has ranked choice voting, the filing deadline is a lot later than virtually every other municipality in the valley.
No preliminary.
So, I mean, if what happened before, if it was in virtually any other city, mayor gets appointed, head of Conservation and Recreation, as Nicole LaChapelle did, it's already too late for whoever becomes interim mayor to sign up. So, I mean, that was helpful as well for him.
Mm-hmm. I do think it's worth noting when it comes to J.T. Terrell and how much money he spent, that he plowed, last time I checked, $12,000 of his own money from his own pockets into his campaign. I think sometimes we see fundraising and we think that, especially on the municipal level, it directly equates to grassroots support and the like. He spent a lot of his own money to ultimately end up in third place here.
All right.
Money helps, but it isn't a guarantee that you're going to win.
That's right.
All right, North Adams Berkshire Eagle, Izzy Breyer's reporting about Jennifer Maxey, saying that she received about 69% of the votes, handily defeating the challenger Scott Berglund there. Quote, to some, this is an easy win, but you never take for granted the people's trust. That's what Maxey told the Eagle at her celebrations post-election. You don't know how proud I am to serve this community, she said. On the campaign trail, Maxey touted her longtime experience at City Hall, securing grant funding and passing the Greylock School project last fall. Berglund, the challenger, pushed being a new voice for the city, pledging more transparency in the administration, and accused Maxey of not sharing information until the last minute. For me, it was interesting in this race. I wonder if Jennifer Maxey would have had a challenger at all had she not seen grassroots pressure from folks who were frustrated with what many people there said was this late announcement regarding some logging that was going to happen along the Notch Reservoir, which is on the lead up to the state's highest peak, Mount Greylock. People were very concerned about the impact potentially on the environment, while the people who were for the project said that the logging was necessary to maintain the area properly. Dusty, I saw your finger go up a second ago. You had a thought? No?
I just think that these kinds of issues end up being really important in municipal races. Where you stand on a particular environmental issue, especially in the Berkshires, could win you a seat or cost you it.
And Maxie kept her seat in this particular instance. Paul Tuthill, what do you think?
Well, it seems she kept it by a fairly comfortable margin. And again, as you said, it looks like the challenger got into the race over this one particular issue, and they kind of lost the issue after the mayor announced her position.
Right, which she ultimately decided not to go forward with the project, so that helps.
Right.
And for Berglund, he's not only a political newcomer, but a newcomer to North Adams, so perhaps we'll see him again at a future date. West Springfield and Westfield saw quieter campaigns. Yeah. NEPM's Jill Kaufman wrote about West Springfield Mayor Will Reichelt, a 10-year incumbent, comfortably won his bid for re-election Tuesday night with 72% of the vote, while Reichelt ran unopposed in the last 2 elections. This year, longtime city councilor Dan O'Brien challenged Reichelt, maintaining that the workings of the mayor's office haven't been transparent enough. Again, like what we saw in North Adams. Reichelt says...
And Northampton, there was a complaint there as well.
Transparency is an issue for people. Reichelt says he will hold more community forums and meetings to increase that transparency. So, hearing there, the criticism, right? Is the challenger in that race a good example, you think, of keeping candidates on their toes? Perhaps Reichelt might not even have had a challenger if Dan O'Brien didn't see issue with this.
Well, I first, it's a little funny. I mean, I'm not saying everybody can be more transparent, but it's a little funny to say Will Reichelt is not transparent given the fact that he basically lived on Facebook Live during the pandemic and gained like 10 pounds eating at every establishment to help him keep it afloat. But that being said, I mean, I think some candidates will... No candidate wants an opponent, but some will say, hey, sometimes it's nice to shake the dust off the campaign. We'll talk about some other races a little bit later where clearly they needed to have more dust shaken off before this year in order to succeed. But I mean, I remember several years ago in Springfield, the first time Ward 2 Councilor Mike Fenton had an opponent, and he was actually excited because it was the first time in years he'd had a chance to break out the machine and
flex those muscles.
Exactly.
Yeah. So in Westfield, Jill Kaufman and Adam Frenier reported that the mayor's race, Mayor Michael McCabe was easily elected to a 3rd term in office, beating challenger Andrew Mullen. But McCabe said that the priorities in his 3rd term include a new police department building, a new hospital emergency department, and getting the state to develop the Westfield exit off of the Mass Turnpike, which I think rivals Palmer in sort of the fact that there's next to nothing there off of a turnpike exit. McCabe took issue with the 2-year term for mayor, which got me a little curious. According to the Mass Municipal Association, there are 47 mayors serving cities across Massachusetts. About half serve a 2-year term and about half serve 4-year terms. Thoughts on 2 versus 4 years, Paul Tuthill?
That number is surprising. I would have guessed that there would have been more 4-year terms than 2-year terms. And I know here in the greater Springfield area, Springfield went to a 4-year term. I think it was about 15 years ago.
Yeah,
within the last decade, Holyoke switched over, Northampton switched over, went from 2 to 4. I think most of the time when the question has been put to voters through a charter change referendum, most of the time they adopt the 4-year term.
Chicopee's been the outlier where they've been resisting it time and time again.
Yep. So I think it is interesting to think about. But for me, it's always a head-scratcher, a 2-year term. What do you get done in 2 years? You pretty much get elected, and then you're automatically running for re-election. We see it with our congressmen.
Well, I was going to say that's been the complaint in Congress for the last 50 years, that it's a constant cycle of election and fundraising, election and fundraising, election and fundraising. You don't do very much else.
Yeah. Well, we'll see if Westfield voters are going to move the needle on this one, if it becomes an issue, since the mayor has pointed it out. Still ahead on the rundown, a closer look at the city council races in Springfield and Holyoke, as Matt Safransky referenced just a moment ago. The municipal races in Western Mass are nonpartisan, but did politics play a role in Holyoke? And we saw the incumbents return to Springfield City Council for the most part, but is there a message given that some of those racers were total nail-biters? If you have thoughts, email the rundown at nepm.org. I'm Carrie Saldo. Stay with us. Welcome back to The Rundown. I am Carrie Saldo here, joined by journalist Esther Christensen, Matt Safransky, and Paul Tuthill. Springfield City Council race. Let's take a look at that. NEPM's Adam Frenier reported that most of the incumbents who sought a return did secure a return to the Springfield City Council. But as I looked at those results, a lot of them were so very close. Is there a message there for leaders to take away from these results? Or is it a win's a win's a win?
I mean, I think that it's both to a certain extent. I mean, if there's a specific message, I'm not sure that there's one you can really reduce it down to. Maybe people are actually kind of just upset with the status quo. I mean, I've made the joke about the mayor who was not on the ballot this year as like the eternal mayor, and maybe there is finally some, not like we hate Sarno, but like, maybe it's been there long enough. Maybe we need something different. And I mean, it's hard to tell because turnout is so low in Springfield generally, like where the actual zeitgeist is. But I mean, I was surprised with some of the races. Like I kind of wrote off, wards 4 and 5, Malo Brown and LeVar Click-Bruce as not having real races. Not that their opponents weren't real opponents. It was just that there wasn't the same energy in those races the way there was in wards 1, 6, and 7. And I was they were all very close.
Speaking of mayor and a comeback, Mayor Dominic Sarno saw a challenger from Justin Hurst this last election cycle, and there was a controversy there that Hurst faced over allegations of buying votes in that last race, which as recently as August was reportedly still being investigated.
Right after he announced that he was running for a council seat, by the way.
Yes, coincidentally, or not coincidentally, perhaps. But Hurst denied that allegation. Do you think that allegation has finally been rejected by voters, Paul, with this win for Hurst?
I guess it has been, yeah. I mean, I don't know how much that, that was the October surprise of the municipal election 2 years ago, right? When this vote buying scandal came out.
Alleged,
yeah, exactly, alleged. So yeah, I guess voters have, I guess Justin Hurst has moved past that, obviously successfully, since he was elected to the city council.
Second highest vote getter
Second highest vote getter. And if you want to know how to run for city council at large and displace an incumbent, ask Justin Hurst, because this is the second time he's done it.
Yep.
The first time he was elected to the council, it was then council president Jimmy Ferrara who was the odd person out. So, so kudos to Hurst for his campaign, and he's a proven vote getter in Springfield. There's no question about it.
Matt, in your coverage for Western Mass Politics and Insight, you pointed out a big surprise in this race, the Ward 7 race. What happened there?
So, longtime Ward 7 City Councilor Timothy Allen, who was elected when ward representation returned in 2009, so he's been there for 16 years, lost to sort of newcomer Jerry Martin. Jerry Martin had run at large 2 years ago. Most observers, myself included, are not shocked to find that Martin would have just simply out-organized Allen. The margin was the really impressive part. I mean, because Tim Allen certainly he has people that dislike him, but he's generally been seen as a decent counselor, an effective, legislator and overseer, and then to lose by that large of a margin, I think really, it spoke to two things. One was that, Martin really did have a very effective campaign. He grew up in that neighborhood. And I think also, as has been observed, Tim Allen was not a politician in the way that a lot of other counselors are, and didn't promote himself as much as perhaps he needed to. And, a lot of his voters 16 years ago are no longer with us. And
Jerry Martin, 25 years old.
Exactly.
A very handy online game, I would imagine. All those things helped to add up to a victory for him. Meanwhile, Springfield Republican newspaper reporter Jeanette DeForge reported on Wednesday, the day after the election, Springfield city councilors aren't wasting any time vying for who's going to be the next council president. We had two different councilors say that they have the votes needed to clinch the council presidency. Tracy Whitfield, the current city council vice president, and then 16-year councilor Melvin Edwards, who served as vice president from 2022 through 2024, both saying, we've got the votes. Not wasting any time here, are they, Dusty Christensen?
I find that surprising. We're still, a month plus out or so
January
until this?
will be
the
reinstalled
politicking
and vote
begins
on this.
early.
Yeah. Absolutely. Jeanette DeForge pointed out that Edwards is one of the more low-key counselors, while Whitfield admits that she is one of the more vocal members who tends to speak frequently on more issues. So is this a savvy play to sort of dissect this in the court of public opinion ahead of January's vote? What do you think, Paul?
Someone either can't count, or someone is being disingenuous. I mean, one of the two of them has the pledges from their colleagues to get the votes to become the next council president.
Councillor Edwards, I believe, alleged that one of the people, he would not say who, that was on Councillor Whitfield's list pledged to him as well, or at the very least told him that he wasn't pledged to Whitfield. This is actually quite common, like behind the scenes. It doesn't break out into the open as often, but it has happened once or twice in the last 30 years, and makes for some nice entertainment.
There was a case a few years ago when Bud Williams was on the council, and I think Bud had claimed that he had support to be the next council president, and it ended up going, I can't remember who it was.
I think it was Angelo Pupolo.
It ended up going to, right, okay, it ended up going to Pupolo then, So, it does occasionally happen. And then we had some intrigue a few years back when it was Justin Hurst, Melvin Edwards, and Marcus Williams. It was a three-way contest, and Williams ended up getting it.
Right.
Marcus Williams ended up getting it. So,
well, we'll know.
But usually these things are, this is real inside baseball.
More on this in January when everyone has forgotten about it. All right, borrowing a summation from Matt Safransky from Western Mac Politics and Insight, municipal races in Western Massachusetts are nonpartisan, yet in Holyoke, maybe party politics seem to play a role. Matt, how so?
So in Holyoke, we saw two longtime counselors, be defeated for re-election. Ward 3 City Councilor David Bartley lost to Ann Thalheimer, who had run against him many times before. So, I mean, that's the more impressive part, that he was defeated because it had been the same opponent. It's not that uncommon for one-on-one people to lose. But for Kevin Jourdain, who's been an institution at Holyoke City Hall, to lose re-election, and part of the reason was because he was targeted by a block of slate of candidates that Mayor Garcia had been backing. Mayor Garcia was up this year, didn't have an opponent, so he put a lot of his effort into, assisting city council candidates. The pattern is that Kevin Jourdain is, a Republican, but it's not that he's a Republican. It's that he was putting forward issues like resolutions on cooperating with immigration and the like, and other
in a city that has an incredibly high Hispanic population.
Incredibly high Hispanic population, a very democratic city, and some of the councilors that were targeted, including David Bartley, who is not technically a Republican but was supporting many of these things, the view was, we're going to go after people that are not in sync with what the voters of Holyoke actually want. And it appears, I mean, if you hear it from the Garcia side, is that what they were doing was, this is who these people have always been. Did you know this? And that appears to have been an effective way to get voters to shift away from them. And it's important to differentiate what happened in Holyoke from Springfield. Justin Hurst bumped people down. So there was nobody that was losing, the voters were specifically avoiding. That was what was happening in Holyoke. They were getting voters to specifically avoid voting for Kevin Jourdain, which would be the default for a lot of incumbents in an at-large race, and that's a much harder task to undertake.
And kudos to Mayor Joshua Garcia politically. I mean, this was really smart political strategy on his part. I mean, he's
didn't have a challenger,
no challenger, but he didn't take the year off. He worked politically to get his allies on the city council. I'll point out that in Boston, Mayor Wu, after she dusted her preliminary opponent and had no opponent in the November final, she too diverted her resources to helping get allies elected to the Boston City Council. So smart political moves on both their parts.
Dusty, you've been following Holyoke a long time in different capacities. You've reported on things happening at the police department. We've recently seen financial issues made very public. The state stepping in and saying we're going to withhold state funds until you get your until you get your paperwork in order. Holyoke, I'm oversimplifying a very complicated situation.
It is very complicated.
But what do you make of this?
I am curious to see what Garcia and his allies are now able to accomplish. Jourdain and his block of voters, though they didn't have a majority, had enough to stymie some of these financial fixes that Holyoke has been trying to make in order to become in compliance with the state and to get their financial house in order. There's also other plans that have been controversial for other reasons. You mentioned policing. Mayor Josh Garcia 2 years ago, when a stray bullet hit a mother on a bus, she lost her unborn child.
Tragic.
Yes, proposed what he called Ezekiel's plan at the time, which had a number of components, but the biggest one was a big increase in policing in the city. It was controversial, and interestingly enough, Jourdain and Bartley were two of the folks, I believe, who voted against that plan. I know that Mayor Garcia mentioned it recently. He might be trying to push a plan like that forward once the new year begins, and these new councilors that are more in line with his vision are on the council. We'll have to wait and see.
We did see 2 at-large seats went to candidates the mayor did not endorse, Michael Sullivan and Howard Greene. So not cleaning clock across the board here.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the ads that Holyoke Forward, Palante, which is the I guess it's technically a super PAC. I'd have to double check that, but it's a PAC for sure. Opposed, they did focus on Jourdain.
And this was the group that Palante was the group that Mayor Garcia was involved with that helped to usher in these new candidates.
Exactly. They targeted Jourdain much more than they targeted Michael Sullivan and Greene. And I should note that part of the motivation for this was there was almost a direct overlap of these like social national issues with the financial reform stuff. And so I think if that financial reform issue wasn't a thing, they wouldn't. Garcia's camp wouldn't have bothered. But it was like these are the same people that are, focusing on that. And some of those, I know Michael Sullivan in particular, ultimately did vote for some of the financial reform. So there was simply not the incentive to go after them the same way there was to go after Jourdain. And I think that made a huge difference. That's part of the reason why you saw Greene and Sullivan run. And also, they made the strategic decision to only endorse 4 out of the 6 seats that are going to get elected at large. So somebody had to win that wasn't necessarily in their camp. And, they were more concerned with making sure someone else didn't win as opposed to getting a 5th vote.
I'm going to be curious to see now in the coming months if things in Holyoke settle down. It has been very spicy at the city council in recent months. And anyone have thoughts on whether this will settle things?
Jourdain, Bartley, they were at the center of a lot of that. At times, screaming matches on the city council floor, in committee as well. I'm curious to know whether the temperature lowers down. I know their contention is that they were being, advocates, and that they're afraid that the councilors in line with the mayor are going to be rubber stamps. I guess we're just going to have to wait and see on all of that.
Yeah. And
I think that it's going to depend a lot on how quickly and how much of the financial reforms get through, because I think that's the main priority. I mean, that's the thing that Garcia has kind of like plugged himself as. He was a town manager before he was mayor. So, if that stuff gets through, I think you will see some cooling. It'll be interesting what happens after that. Like, what's going to be the main focus in the city after that, and whether or not things will remain as are. And it's important to note a couple of those Jourdain allies are still on the council, so I don't expect that to completely go away.
Also, this is all swirling at a time where Holyoke regained control of its school district. So maybe a pivot back to focusing on what's happening at Holyoke Public Schools. We shall see. All right, let's head to Scoops, Praises, and Predictions, where I ask our rundowners to make a prediction about the news, dish on a story that they're working on, or heap some praise on a newsworthy nugget. Paul Tedhill.
Well, I would just like to give a shout-out, praise to Lori Lozelle, a former colleague of all of ours who spent 30 years at the Daily Hampshire Gazette, was then the communications director for about a decade for the Northwestern DA Dave Sullivan, and on Tuesday was elected to the Northampton City Council.
In keeping with our election theme. Good job, Paul.
I'll
Dusty Christensen.
I'll keep with the election theme, too. My 2 children, Charlie and Sasha, hello if you're listening, came to the polls with me and my wife, Ariane, asked really great questions about why we vote in secret, about what ranked choice voting is all about. We live in East Hampton. So I want to give praise to my 2 children for being civically engaged at the ages of 5 and almost 8.
I love taking Logan to the polls with me. It's fantastic. Matt Safransky, how about for you?
I'm going to give a tepid praise to the citizens of Springfield. This was the highest turnout in raw number midterm for the city since we started having midterms, with the 4-year terms coming into play. So 12,000 people voted this year, more than ever in any other midterm. One step in the right direction.
All right, one step in the right direction. Fantastic. Well, I have praise for our rundown crew here. The anthem that you hear is by the Love Crumbs. Our director is Tony Dunn. Our board op today is Bart Rakin. Our engineers, Phil Bishop, Kara Foster, Dave Sears, and Chuck Dubé. Production support in digital is by Ayu Suryawan. If you have something to say, email the rundown at nepm.org. That's the rundown at nepm.org. Join us right here every Friday at 9 for the rundown on 88.5 NEPM. I'm Carrie Saldo. Get out there and have a great Friday, everybody, and happy birthday, Dad.